The pounding of the rain on a cold, unforgiving field. It's a setting told in stories throughout the world. In the fields of battle, this no man's land becomes a fight for mere inches. A rugby scrum where no one is left unscathed. On a miserable Monday night in Pittsburgh, we had such an affair. It's a shame that it had to be called football. It was far more than that. Those who saw this game witnessed greatness. In November of 2007, the two teams colliding were on opposite paths. One team was thinking towards something greater. The other was just hoping for it all to end. On one side, the home team, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Fresh off a Super Bowl roughly 18 months earlier, they were in a transitionary phase. The longtime head coach Bill Cowher had just retired for young blood in Mike Tomlin. His first year had the group rebound to form, bouncing from an 8-8 campaign to a 7-3 start. They knew what they wanted. Another ring. True superiority. And their opponent was just an inconvenient bump in the road. The unfortunate souls who were to suffer this fate? The Miami Dolphins. Unlike the Steelers, they had been suffering through years without a true identity. Once Dan Marino retired, they had failed to find a competent successor. All the journeymen in the world couldn't fix it, and neither could a swing of coaches like Dave Wanstead and Nick Saban. This year was rock bottom. Trent Green suffered a season-ending concussion, and then came Cleo Lemon. God help them. They were down to a 26-year-old rookie named John Beck. He had been drafted in the second round. Goes to show you how bad the Dolphins were run at the time. Enough to fall to 0-10, and potentially be the first team in NFL history to go 0-16. This was expected to be an easy matchup for the Steelers, but they were playing at Heinz Field. Ever since it had opened, the field conditions were atrocious. Nothing they did could get the sod to stay consistent. Around the time November hit, the field had taken a severe beating. Football steamrollers were a common sight. Just like everything else in Pittsburgh, the grass probably died. It frustrated the team at every turn. Amplifying the issues were the events that had taken place days before. High school football championships had taken place at Heinz Field the previous Friday. 4 games in a single day. The next day, Pitt hosted USF to a sparse crowd with more yellow seats than people. Unsurprisingly, the Panthers continued to underachieve and were walloped by the Bulls of South Florida. The real test of this field would begin after this contest. With their 7th game in 11 days coming up, the grounds crew got to work putting new sod on top of the battered field. Barring extreme circumstances, the field would hold up fine for Monday night. Except for one scenario: the rain. Torrential downpours struck the Pittsburgh region that day. With the new sod not fully integrated, it created some of the most heinous football conditions in recent history. The deluge was as relentless as the Steeler defense. Trapped in between sods, the water was constantly overflowing the discolored grass above, bringing back memories of Passchendaele. Most field markers were washed away by the time kickoff ensued. Even as the game was delayed by 25 minutes, this was going to be a nightmare for both teams. The field conditions were the ultimate equalizer. No matter the Steelers' advantage on offense, it meant nothing if they literally couldn't move the ball. Neither team could. The match became literal trench warfare. A war of mere inches and short passes. Divots, craters, and mud pits were the stars of this game. That and a quick interception by former Steeler Joey Porter on the first drive. Miami's offense wasn't much of a challenge. Even worse, by the relentless steel curtain ending most chances early on. This was even Ricky Williams' first game since 2006, and even he couldn't overcome the elements. But this was a hollow win. The game became a stalemate. The rain didn't stop, but drives always did. The punting was fierce, both men giving their right legs a heavy workout. In normal circumstances, they would try field goals from around the 35-yard line. But in these conditions, it was near impossible. They would have to get closer. And they couldn't. At the end of the first half, the game would remain scoreless as the players retreated to the dry oasis of the locker room. It was unfortunate that they had to go back out there. The poor grounds crew tried their damnedest, even trying to remark the field, but it was to little avail. It still vanished like most offense. More scrums for inches, more inability to move the ball, and more punting.
Oh god, that never gets old.
I remember this happening live and just laughing hysterically. I have never seen anything like this and probably will never see it happen again. You wonder why this is a great game? This is why. The Steelers sought to end this madness with a methodical offensive drive. In these conditions, anything is a success. And they would be bold. They would try to kick a field goal. On a normal day, a 44-yarder towards the river was a daring enterprise in itself. Tonight, they couldn't even set the ball properly. The field laughs at the terrible kick. But to the horror of the brave souls in attendance, Miami was doing the same in kind. Pushing down the field, getting into field goal range. They would try their luck as well, and be even worse off. Saving the poor kicker, there was a delay of game penalty. Pittsburgh would slap them back to reality the next play. This would continue further and further into the game. It was now the longest scoreless NFL game in over 20 years. The plodding pace, like a horse trying to plow a dry field to plant the crops of victory, harkens back to the days of yonder, when men wore leather helmets, and the Dolphins didn't exist. The clock would continue to tick down. The rain would continue to beat on the players. The sod would remain hypothetical quicksand. It had now become the longest game without points scored since the snowplow game of '83. Miami should know that well. They played New England in it. Would they tie at 0? There was a chance. Nothing was being done offensively. What was the longest scoring drought since the 80s was now the longest since World War II. This final drive may be the Steelers' only chance to score points. They penetrated the deepest of any team in this game, the red zone. But even in several chances, they were unsuccessful in crossing the unmarked plane. They had no choice. They had to try it again. A field goal. What should be a chip shot became the greatest challenge in a kicker's life. The field treacherous to run in. The ball slicker than grease. And even if everything was perfect, the shifting sod could troll them all. But fortunately, it showed mercy. The kick was good. An exasperated cheer rang from every fan watching and in attendance. They would not tie the Dolphins. Miami would remain winless for another week. They would eventually win an overtime thriller against Baltimore several weeks later, thus saving them from the dreaded 0-16. That would be Detroit's dishonor the next year. Pittsburgh, on the polar opposite side of the spectrum, would continue to push for the playoffs. They would succeed but falter on a final drive to Jacksonville in the wildcard game, on the same shitty field that hosted this gem. The Steelers would eventually solve their terrible turf issues, but what goes around comes around. Especially when it relates to what they call the Mud Bowl. But we should refer to it as something else. The greatest game. The greatest game. We'll be right back after these messages. When I wake up in the morning, I need a way to round into form. I ask myself, how can I become more of an obnoxious know-it-all that thinks he's better than everyone else? I need a coffee that's as self-important as I am. Benchwarmer has made a brew that holds these ideals. The Armchair Quarterback Blend. With a cup of this fine coffee, you'll be demanding everyone be fired after a loss by 6 in Week 9. The beans are ethically sourced from the finest hot takes around the world. And best of all, it's dark and bitter, just like me. Your coffee needs to be as insufferable as you are on Sundays. Reach a level of unathletic enlightenment with Benchwarmer Brew. You can just smell the toxicity. It's quite delicious.